Hello friends and welcome back to Play Recaps. Today I will recap you a drama, crime and thriller movie titled At the End of the Tunnel, released in 2016. Joaquin is a computer engineer who lost the use of his legs in a vehicle accident. He now lives alone in the large, historic home where he raised his wife and daughter before they died. His lone companion is Casimiro, an old dog who has been sick for some time. Calling the vet to find out how his tests came out, Joaquin is told that they can do nothing. Joaquin finds information online on humanely euthanizing a dog, purchases the necessary drug, and injects it into some biscuits, which he then stores in a jar. A woman named Berta and her daughter named Betty, who can talk but doesn't, came in one afternoon to inquire about the terrace room he rents. It really annoys Joaquin that they saw the ad and showed up without contacting him first. Betty tries to pet Casimiro, but he gives her a growl as Joaquin advises her not to since Casimiro doesn't like people she doesn't know. He is irritated even more by Berta's sudden decision to move in, but he is willing to overlook this inconvenience in light of the fact that he needs the money to pay the impending seizure of his home. Joaquin is extremely reclusive, therefore he resents it when Berta visits him on the ground floor or offers to help him clean up. In spite of his refusal to engage with Berta, she persists in her attempts to get to know him. She gives him a brief introduction, telling him that she is a classically trained dancer who moved to the big city in search of fame and fortune, but instead found herself dancing in vain against poles. She tries to convince him to sell the house to pay off his creditors, but he refuses to say why. It's clear that the house carries sentimental value for him. Berta also plays music too loudly, and Betty has a tendency of hiding in odd places, but despite this, both of them eventually grow on Joaquin, especially after they prepare a special birthday dinner for him. Casimiro, who had previously been growling at Betty, eventually calmed down and approached the child, letting her give him a hug. Seeing this causes Joaquin to cry, but he waits until he's alone to do so. Joaquin likes to do his computer work down in the basement. He mounts a stethoscope on the wall after noticing strange sounds emanating from next door. There appears to be a group of men on the opposite side who are also monitoring his every move and sound. They may even be aware that he uses a wheelchair. They agree to meet again later, when they will be less likely to be overheard. So Joaquin tapes the stethoscope to the wall and hooks it up to his computer, so that whatever they say can be recorded while he has supper with the girls upstairs. The next day, Joaquin listens to the recording and makes a note of the names he hears, but he still doesn't know what's going on underground other than the fact that they're rearranging some wood. Needing some background information, he uses a screwdriver to cut a tiny hole in the wall, into which he slides a tiny camera that connects to his computer, and then covers the whole thing up with an old computer cabinet. After that, Berta gets very angry because they signed a contract, but he tries to force her and Betty out for their own protection and doesn't tell them why. She says he's too fearful to trust others to get close to them, and she offers him until morning to change his mind. Joaquin gives them the okay to stay the next day. Once he returns to the basement, he'll start rewatching the footage and making notes. All of the men's work appears to be done at night, and they're excavating a hole that needs to be finished by Christmas Eve. There's also talk of an explosive. What comes as the biggest surprise, though, is Berta showing up there too. She escaped his gaze by going across the rooftops to the other side, and she is not only familiar with these men, but also in a romantic connection with their commander, Gallardo. The room she leased was chosen specifically so she could keep an eye on him, and Gallardo scolds her for coming over because she may have been caught. He sends her away with instructions to only communicate with him via text after handing her a unique key. After Joaquin goes to bed that night, Betty enters the room in her underwear to peer in on him for a moment. Joaquin keeps watching the tapes until he catches a glimpse of one of the men looking at a blueprint and realizes their plan. They're excavating a tunnel to rob the bank down the street. Betty doesn't seem to care that Joaquin is trying to befriend her while Berta is out at the market. Joaquin puts a microphone under Casimiro's collar since he knows Betty is talking to him. The men, as Joaquin discovers, intend to transport the money by pushing and pulling a small cart equipped with wheels along the tunnel. While debating this course of action, Gallardo learns that one of his guys, Nuco, has been texting inside the house and has forwarded the bank's address to an outsider before tying him to a table, where he begins to scream and explain that all he wanted to do on his break was see a girl he likes but hasn't told her anything. After berating him for endangering the operation, Gallardo resorts to stabbing him in the head with a screwdriver and then smashing his skull with a hammer. While all this is going on, Joaquin watches with a phone in his hand, debating whether or not to call the police. Canario, Gallardo's brother, asks whether they should do anything with the body, and Gallardo assures him that the corrupt cop who is aiding them with their scheme will handle things. After Joaquin has recovered the microphone from Casimiro's collar, he drugs Berta's wine before tying her to his bed. He then takes her phone and sets an alarm for when he has to sedate her again. After that, he keeps viewing the tapes and finds out the cop they're working with gave the thieves information that they shouldn't touch safes 747 and 748 since they belong to highly significant dealers. A replacement for Miko, a lady named Rena, comes with the explosives needed to break into the bank. Joaquin feeds Berta when she wakes up and asks her why she's going together with such a jerk. But Berta explains that although he may be a thief, he won't injure anyone. Joaquin takes his laptop and shows her what they did to Miko to gain her cooperation. Berta is seeing her boyfriend be a cruel person. Joaquin goes to see Betty and encourages her not to be afraid of him. He then lets her move into his daughter's former room, and she brings Casimiro with her. And then Joaquin starts hatching a scheme to steal some cash from the criminals. His plan is to drill a hole in the floor above their tunnel, and then lean down and grab the cash from the cart as it passes. While massaging Berta's arms, he informs her about his plan, but she tells him he'll get caught and killed, so he puts her to sleep again after taking the key Gallardo gave her off her necklace. After returning to see the robbers at work, Joaquin overhears them muttering obscenities after discovering a water line in the tunnel, indicating that they had been digging in the incorrect direction. They can get it fixed, but it will take an extra day, so they won't make it there until Christmas Day instead of Christmas Eve. This is unfortunate because Christmas fireworks are traditionally shot off in Argentina on December 24th, but hopefully everyone will be too busy partying to notice. A cat carrier is substituted for the small cart since it is larger, more stable, and its contents will remain intact in the event of a fall. This is terrible news for Joaquin because he can no longer rob the cart as it passes because the cat carrier is closed on top. Joaquin can't avoid altering his plans. After he's done digging the hole in the floor, he'll fill in the lid he built with dirt and make sure it's sealed properly so no one will notice. Moreover, he measures and inspects the pipe to guarantee that water is still passing through it. When he turns around, he finds Gallardo and Canario emerging from the tunnel, so he quickly retreats to the deserted area and hides while listening to them discuss a secret hideout known only to themselves, Zurdo and Gallardo. Canario isn't thrilled that Zurdo is aware of everything, especially in light of what happened between the two of them and Nuco. When Joaquin returns to the house after the two men have left, he sedates Berta once more, but this time Betty is not in the house. Joaquin learns that Betty has gone down the pit. After checking the camera, Joaquin confirms his suspicions. She was indeed gone down the tunnel and into the other house. The men have just returned to the basement, but fortunately, Betty is aware that she must hide. Gutman, the dishonest police officer who is assisting them with their operation, shows there while Zurdo searches for the watch he knows he placed there but can't seem to locate. He has provided them a list of all the safes that should be avoided because of the alarms, and he has promised to dispatch police officers elsewhere. In exchange, Gallardo will have to get the documents from safe 155 back to Gutman so he can stop being threatened. Betty goes back inside the home when they depart, and Joaquin helps her up, only to learn that she is the one who stole Zerdo's watch. Soon after, Joaquin realizes that Gallardo is calling Berta instead of messaging her, and he urgently needs her to answer the phone before he becomes suspicious. Since she still won't talk, Joaquin pulls his computer back out and, reminding her that Betty stopped talking 2 years ago, about the time she met Gallardo, plays the audio from Casimiro's collar, in which she describes how Gallardo secretly touched her. Berta starts crying and is really upset because of what happened to her daughter, agrees to help Joaquin. He reveals his plan to flood the tunnel. After a brief pause, she answers the phone and reassures Gallardo. Joaquin sedates her once again once she finishes her call. Joaquin and Betty spend Christmas Eve together watching fireworks as the criminals set up the bomb. After locking Betty in her room, Joaquin takes advantage of the break to transfer the explosive and place it on the water line before they return to work at 8 in the morning. Then he travels to the bank's end of the tunnel and opens a hole that leads there. Once there, he picks the lock of one of the off-limits safes, 748, empties its contents into a bag, and leaves without fully closing the safe behind him. While returning, he spots Rene investigating the tunnel. He plans on hiding the same way he did before, but they're going to turn on the fan to clean the air in the tunnel, forcing him to quickly return to the bank to avoid suffocation. Afterwards, he is able to sneak back to his residence before they catch him because their preparations took so long. They set off the explosive, which causes water to seep from the pipe, but they don't realize it since they discover the hole Joaquin excavated and assume the explosion caused the leak. Rene walks into the bank with Pitchy and Schwarzenegger, 2 of Gallardo's employees, and they immediately begin emptying the savings in accordance with the numbers Gutman had allocated them. Once they find out that 748 has been opened, they realize that water is beginning to fill the tunnel and have no time to worry about the situation. Even though Gallardo, Canario, and Zerdo are aware of the situation, they do nothing to improve it and instead flee with the money they have. Pitchy and Schwarzenegger also try to escape, but the tunnel is nearly full at this point, so they return to the bank and unlock a connected safe to trigger an alarm, and perhaps be discovered by the authorities before they drown. Unfortunately for Rene, she is unable to make it to the other side of the tunnel in time and becomes trapped there. When Joaquin hears her cries for help, he opens the hole to rescue her, but she immediately begins shouting and warns the others about the neighbor as she tries to pull him down with her. Frightened, Joaquin lets go of her and closes the hole again, leaving her to drown. As the pipe finally gives out, water begins to pour into the bank and Joaquin's cellar. Before leaving the basement with his bag of cash, he removes the whole lid and scrubs the dirt off so it doesn't look suspicious. And then he pulls a rope he had prepared earlier to cause a lot of old computer cabinets to fall on top of it. When he goes to check on Berta as the whole block's electricity goes out, she turns violent and pins him to the bed, demanding to know why he didn't trust her. Berta refuses to believe Joaquin when he kisses her and says he has the money so they can all go together, and Joaquin has to punch her to knock her unconscious. He sedates her, washes the dirt off of himself, and walks outside to speak to the police, pretending to be a concerned neighbor about the water in his basement. The cops tell them to wait inside. Nearby Supervisor Gutman phones Gallardo to find out what's going on, but Gallardo has no idea what's going on either. When Gutman finds out they were unable to obtain his documents, he abruptly ends the call. After a few minutes, Gutman arrives at Joaquin's house with a contingent of police officers to conduct a search, and Joaquin once again plays along, pretending to be an innocent citizen who simply wants the system to do something about the flood damage. He had already released Betty and had her remain in his room with Berta, pretending to be his wife and daughter. Since the hole he excavated in the basement is no longer visible due to the sinking floor, the police decide there is nothing unusual about his home and leave. Berta's phone is in Joaquin's hand, and Galarito keeps trying to call him, but he never picks up. Finally, as Gutman is leaving the house, he grabs Berta's phone, thinking it's Joaquin's, and saves his number, asking Joaquin to call him if he remembers anything that might be useful to the investigation. Moments afterward, Galarito, Zurdo, and Canario arrive at the residence, also in police disguises. Joaquin doesn't want to alert the police, so he lets them in and texts Gutman to come over. During this time, Galarito receives a call from Gutman, who is furious that he opened safe 748, but he abruptly hangs up on him and proceeds to question Joaquin. He tries to convince him that he lives alone because the woman who was renting his room departed the day before, and that his basement flooded when robbers tried to rob the bank. But just then Betty rushes out of the room and ruins his cover. Galarito gets his rifle and, after making sure Berta is still sedated, picks up Betty and tries to question Joaquin once again. Galarito pulls him off his chair and into the floor because he continues to play innocent and make up more stories that end up contradicting each other. Canario begins punching and kicking him in an attempt to force a confession out of him. He is saved only when Berta's phone rings. Galarito discovers it and answers the phone, only to hear Gutman say that he is at the door and is looking for Joaquin. Frightened by this unexpected development, Galarito invites Gutman inside and demands to know how he obtained Berta's number, all while Canario holds him captive. Galarito is about to shoot Joaquin because neither he nor Gutman has any idea what's going on, which prompts Joaquin to spill the beans. But what he says is a lie, albeit a more convincing one. He pretends to know Zurdo and seeks for help from him. Using what he overheard while eavesdropping on them, he informs Galarito that Zurdo planned to cross the roofs to his house and beat up and sedate Berta. Joaquin was the one he told about the robbery and instructed to cut a hole in the floor and remove some cash, which they would then divide among themselves. In response to Zurdo's accusations of dishonesty, Joaquin reveals the existence of a secret hideout known only to Galarito, Zurdo, and Canario, and instructs them to check a neighboring cupboard where they would supposedly find Zurdo's forgotten watch. Zurdo, feeling trapped, fires at Canario, who returns fire, and they both die instantly. Berta wakes up when Galarito is still crying over his brother's death, and she uses the gun he dropped to kill him for what he did to her daughter. Now all the robbers are dead. Gutman frees himself from the weak rope they used to bind him and offers to assist. After loading the dead into his trunk, he instructs Joaquin on how to clean up the blood and then demands the stolen funds from him. Joaquin tells him he has a recording of him collaborating with the thieves. While eating Casimiro's biscuits from the jar, like their regular cookies, Gutman chuckles and threatens Berta with his own revolver. There's nothing Joaquin can do but give him the money and watch him leave. While driving away, Gutman begins to feel the effects of Casimiro's narcotics, which leads him to become disoriented and wreck his car, igniting a fire. As a result, he decides to simply lie down and wait for death or the police to come and take him. Many days later, Joaquin has finished cleaning and emptying his home in preparation for his move to Mexico with Berta, Betty, and Casimiro.